Have you ever been smeared online by your own child, painted as the cold-hearted old man who abandoned his family, so that they could squeeze more money out of you? People called me ruthless, while the truth is I had poured nearly $500,000 into them over 15 years. And then, right in the middle of a courtroom packed with reporters, I tore open every bank statement and every receipt, making the entire community gasp. Who was really the freeloader? If you have listened to this story, I am truly grateful. Please hit subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from, because your presence is the very strength that allows me to keep exposing truths so many want hidden. March in Charleston carries the salt-heavy sea breeze through the old brick-paved streets where I have walked for more than 4 decades. I, Edmund Caldwell, once a Navy captain, was used to the roar of waves and the clang of metal against the deck. Yet that night, in the wide dining room of my daughter's house, I felt more adrift than ever. A polished walnut table stood in the center, candles flickering on silver holders, ruby red wine shimmering in crystal glasses. Everything looked like a grand dinner party, but I knew this evening was not just a family meal. Rachel, my daughter, always knew how to set the stage before moving into serious matters. Victor, her husband, sat across from me. His eyes gleamed as if he had just struck gold. The glow of the iPad screen cast a greenish light on a face lined not by labor, but by ambition. "Edmund," Victor began, his voice eager, "this is an opportunity we cannot miss. A logistics AI platform, beta test complete. It only needs capital to scale its infrastructure. You just need to put in $300,000. In 2 years, it will double, even triple." The words 300,000 rang in my ears like an alarm on a warship deck. Rachel laid a hand gently on her husband's shoulder, then turned to me. "Dad, this isn't borrowing anymore. This is an investment. You've always helped us. And this time you'll truly see results. I'll handle PR. Victor has the idea. It's all going to take off." I set my fork down. The smoked salmon on my plate suddenly tasted sour. For 15 years, I had poured in nearly $500,000, from the wedding to mortgage payments to tuition, medical bills, and cars. Every time they called it help. Not once had there been results as promised. "Victor," I said, my voice low but firm, "I will not invest. I will not lend. I've done enough." Silence. The room froze. I could hear the clink of silverware, the faint hiss of wind through the glass panes opening out to the orange grove. Rachel slammed her glass onto the table. Red wine splattered, staining the white cloth like blood. My daughter's face, the little girl who once sobbed in my arms after falling off her bike at 10, was now flushed, her eyes cold as steel. "Then don't expect to stay much longer." That dagger, if it had been stabbed into my back, I might have endured, but it came from the very child I had raised with sweat, money, and years at sea. The room spun. I remembered 22 months earlier, when Caroline died, Rachel had clasped my hand and said, "Dad, come live with us. Family takes care of each other." I believed her. I left my riverside home on the Ashley and moved here for the warmth of kin. And now the lips that once promised, "Family takes care of each other," were telling me to leave. I faltered, my hand trembling. "What did you just say?" Rachel's voice did not soften. "We've given you a home for 5 years now, ever since Mom passed. Now we need you to truly be part of us. If you turn your back, then you should find somewhere else to live." Lily, my granddaughter, sat silent, her spoon shaking in her hand. She avoided my eyes. Ethan, my grandson, leaned back in his chair, smirking. His gaze did not plead. It hinted, "If the old man is gone, I can spend freely without lectures about saving." There was nothing left to say. I set down my knife and fork and stood. My leather shoes thudded against the hardwood floor. Climbing the stairs, my heart pounded not from age, but from bitterness. In my room, I shut the door. Below, I heard Rachel and Victor's voices fading into whispers. I sat on the bed, hand on Caroline's picture. Her gentle smile seemed to whisper, "It's time to stop, Edmund. Guard what remains of your life." That night, I did not sleep. River wine pushed through the curtains, streetlights casting long stripes across the floor. I remembered every check, every loan, every emergency I had covered. How many times have I told myself family is family, only to be pushed out by that very family? A decision began to form inside me, a decision that would change everything, not just for me, but for those who thought of me as a walking ATM. I nearly did not close my eyes all night. The Ashley River breeze slipped through the window frame, mingling with the cold blue glow of the alarm clock, reminding me I had let my life be pulled too long. At dawn, I rose and pulled open the small steel cabinet by the desk. It groaned like the bulkheads of old warships. Inside the bottom drawer lay what I treasured most: financial records, organized like the logbooks of a sailor. Each file labeled neatly: Rachel's wedding, 2009, Ethan's college tuition, Lily's medical bills, Rachel's mortgage, Victor's car, Hawaii family trip, medical emergency 2018, all with signatures, receipts, and copies of the checks I had written. I pulled the first file. It was the wedding contract from June 6th, 2009. Caroline was still alive then, and I had signed a check for $60,000 for the lavish Kiowa Island seaside ceremony. I remembered Caroline saying, "Edmund, she only marries once. She deserves her fairy tale." I agreed. We told ourselves Rachel would be grateful. Next came the bank statements. 5 years of me paying $4,800 each month to cover the mortgage on this house. In total, over $280,000. Another $35,000 for Rachel's SUV, $22,000 for Victor's sedan when his old car broke down. I still kept the insurance receipts. Bills they should have paid, but with poor credit, they needed me to sign. I took my pocket calculator, pressed each number. The clicks echoed like soldiers' boots on deck. The total climbed. 60,000 plus 280,000 plus 35,000 plus 22,000. Then Ethan's tuition, 15,000 per semester for an engineering major he dropped out of. Lily's tuition is 8,000 per semester. The Hawaii anniversary trip for Rachel and Victor is $12,000. Roof repairs after a hurricane, 18,000. Medical bills for Victor when his startup lost insurance, 9,500. The total after 15 years, $518,700. I leaned back, my hands trembling over the file. That sum was nearly all my savings from 40 years at sea, plus Caroline's life insurance. We had dreamed it would fund our retirement. A cottage by the river, trips to Europe, quiet days on the porch with books. Instead, it had dissolved into endless expenses for my daughter and her family. From a small drawer, I pulled a crucial paper, the power of attorney, signed 3 years earlier when I had knee replacement surgery. Rachel had said then, "Dad, just sign. I'll only use it if necessary. You don't need to worry." I trusted her, and I signed. That paper gave her access to my accounts whenever she claimed an emergency. I looked at my shaky signature on the page. Caroline had once warned me, "Never sign documents when your children beg." I didn't listen. I turned on the shredder. The screech of blades tearing paper echoed through the room. The power of attorney turned into white fragments, as if every slice was a chain being broken. The landline beeped as I dialed the bank. "This is Edmund Caldwell, account number 3921. I want to cancel all automatic transfers to the account of Rachel Whitaker, effective immediately." The banker hesitated. "Are you certain, sir?" "These transfers have been ongoing for 15 years. "I'm certain." "Cancel them now." When I set the phone down, my heart slowed, as if the ship had just avoided an iceberg. I stayed at the desk, writing notes with my fountain pen. I didn't just want to escape, I wanted proof. Every receipt, every figure I arranged into a complete file, not only to remind myself, but so no one could deny it. Morning light pierced through the curtains, shining on the desk. The papers glared with cold numbers. $518,700. I underlined and circled it, reminding myself I had already paid enough. When Rachel threw the words, "Don't expect to stay long," at me, she didn't know I held a vault of evidence, not for revenge, but to end dependency once and for all. I rose and pulled the curtains wide. Outside, the sun had climbed, the Ashley River glittering gold. I whispered to myself, "Edmund, it's time to leave this rotten ship. You've steered vessels all your life. Now steer your own." I sat for hours in that room, staring at the thick folder before me. $500,000 weighed on my shoulders. Years at sea had brought storms and clanging steel, but no tempest had drained me like this storm called family. When the clock struck 10, I stood. The house was silent. Victor had gone out. Rachel worked the morning shift at the hotel. Lily was at school. Ethan was still asleep, and rap music thumped faintly behind his half-closed door. I knew this was the moment. I opened the closet and pulled out the brown leather suitcase that had followed me since aircraft carrier days. Its scars told of decades of travel, ports across Europe and Asia, nights alone on the ocean. Now it would carry me away again, not by military order, but by the command of dignity. I chose carefully. My faded navy uniform, still smelling of mothballs, I folded neatly. Medals and service pins went into a velvet box, wrapped in Caroline's handkerchief. A photograph of our 40th anniversary sat on top, my compass for this new journey. Packing paused when I reached the moss-green armchair. Caroline had given it to me on my 70th birthday. Countless nights I had read, listened to jazz, or closed my eyes in it to remember her laughter. Rachel had often said, "Dad, you should leave the chair in the living room for us to use." I said nothing then, but this morning I decided the chair comes with me. It was a memory, and I would not let them take it. By noon, as the grandfather clock chimed, I wrote a letter, white paper, blue ink. My handwriting is steady, like log entries from voyages past. Rachel and Victor, I have decided to leave. The key is on the kitchen table. You will see I have canceled all financial support. For 15 years, I have done enough. The house, cars, tuition, and even your luxury trips. Instead of gratitude, you treated it as an endless duty. You wanted independence from my expectations. Now you have independence from my money? Do not seek me until you understand responsibility and respect. Edmund. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in the center of the dining table, the same spot where my daughter had told me, "Don't expect to stay long." I wanted my words to ring like a bell each time she passed. At 1 o'clock sharp, I called the movers. 3 young men arrived in a small truck. They eyed the armchair, the box of books, the suitcase, and a few labeled cartons. "Just these, Mr. Caldwell?" one asked. "These are enough," I said. "The rest? Leave for them." While they carried the load, I stood in the doorway, taking one last look. The family photo wall gleamed under the sunlight. Each frame captured the smiles I had bought with my money. Now they mocked me as portraits of exploitation. As the truck rolled down the driveway, I followed in my old pickup. In the rear view, the house shrank. I felt no regret, only the relief of shedding rusty armor worn too long. My destination was not my old house on the Ashley River. I would never return there. Caroline and I once dreamed of a small lakefront apartment, quiet, free of excess space, filled with meaningless things. So I found and rented a place on Lake Eola, where our unfinished dream could still breathe. Sitting in the armchair placed in the corner, I opened the window, letting the lake breeze in. Children's laughter drifted from the park. I sipped black coffee from a corner cafe downstairs, its bitter taste oddly sweet. That evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Rachel's name flashed. I let it ring out. 5 minutes later, a text arrived. "Dad, I saw the letter. I went to the old house, but you weren't there. You can't do this. This is still your home. Call me now. I did not reply. I set the phone on the table and looked out. Lake Eola shimmered with streetlight reflections, rippling gently as if whispering, "You were right to leave." That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. No whispers, no clashing dishes from the kitchen, no feeling of being a stranger in my own home. Only me, the lake breeze, and freedom. The first morning in my Lake Eola apartment, I brewed black coffee. The wind swept the white curtains. I sat at the small table, opened the file I had carried. Last night's cold numbers still haunted me. Leaving the house was not enough. I needed a fortress to shield what remained of my life. I called Orlando Trust Bank to book a meeting with the senior manager. The glass-walled office overlooking downtown reminded me of ship bridges, where every decision demanded full focus. James Walker, the manager, shook my hand politely. "Mr. Caldwell, I reviewed the transfers. For 15 years, you sent over $500,000. Honestly, I've never seen such patience." "I don't call it patience," I replied. "I call it blindness. And now I want it to end. I need to know how to protect what's left." James nodded, typing quickly. "Your main account is still strong, but if your family truly depends on you, stopping transfers is only the first step." He referred me to an asset protection attorney 3 blocks away. Leaving the bank with a thick printout, I felt lighter yet angrier. Every line of those statements was proof of exploitation. The attorney, Clara Jennings, a woman in her 40s with a slender frame and a sharp voice, welcomed me into an office lined with legal books. A small family photo rested on her desk. "Mr. Caldwell," she said after hearing me out, "this isn't rare. Many elderly people are treated by their families like endless cash machines. You need legal armor. We'll set up a Nevada Asset Protection Trust so your assets are shielded from any demands or pressure from your daughter." I leaned back and listened. Clara laid out the legal map before me, each clause as clear as a battle plan. "This trust will name a single beneficiary. Whom do you want?" I didn't hesitate. "Lily, my granddaughter. She has never asked me for a dime. She only wants a proper education." Clara smiled. "Then we'll have everything passed to Lily, to be distributed only after you pass away. In the meantime, you retain full use. Rachel and Victor won't be able to touch a cent, even if they have the old power of attorney." I took from my briefcase an envelope of paper shreds, the very power of attorney I had destroyed the day before. "This is all that's left." Clara nodded. "Good. That makes it even safer. I'll prepare a draft. Come back tomorrow to sign before a notary. Once it's done, they can cry, threaten, or sue, but it will be useless." Leaving her office, I held the provisional papers and felt as if I had raised a wall of steel around my assets. I knew Rachel wouldn't give up easily, but this time I was no longer a ship drifting in rough seas. I had dropped anchor in safe waters. In the afternoon, I sat on the balcony facing Lake Eola, the trust draft on the table. My phone buzzed nonstop inside. Rachel, Victor, even Ethan, I didn't pick up. I remembered Lily's eyes last Christmas when she handed me the wool scarf she had knitted. Nothing fancy, nothing lavish, just heart. In that moment, I knew I had chosen the right person to trust. Night fell and I opened my laptop, typing one line into my digital journal. On March 12th, I finished building my protective wall. No one can knock and drain me anymore. From today on, I will live the life Caroline wanted, peaceful, free, and no longer bound by the selfishness of relatives. Outside, city lights rippled across the lake. I sank into the armchair and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, my dream no longer slipped through my fingers. A week after I signed the trust paperwork with attorney Clara Jennings, I'd settled into the rhythm of my Lake Eola apartment. Morning coffee, afternoon walks, reading at night. The peace seemed unbreakable. But I knew that before a storm fully passes, there are always the last waves trying to swamp the ship. I had predicted Rachel would track down my new place. Sure enough, after reading the letter I left, she dragged Victor to the old house where Caroline and I had lived. The place had been empty a long time, but an old friend of mine, Harold, later called to say Rachel had come asking if he knew where I'd moved. She didn't stop there. She questioned the moving company. The final clue slipped. The truck had turned toward Lake Eola. I knew Victor would show up soon. On Thursday night, the doorbell rang loudly. Through the peephole, Victor. He wore a dark blue suit, a tie too carefully knotted, and a bottle of expensive red wine in hand. He put on that friendly face I knew too well, the smile that appears only when he needs something from me. "Edmund," Victor boomed as I cracked the door. "I just want to talk. Nothing heavy. I brought an Italian wine you'll like. Let's sit down, man to man." I folded my arms, blocking the doorway. "Come in, but don't expect another cent?" He forced a grin and stepped in. The apartment was small, just a round dining table and 2 chairs. I let him sit while I took my usual armchair. The bottle sat like a useless prop. "You know," he began, brimming with confidence, "my startup really has potential. I've spent years researching, and all we lack is capital. With your experience, you can see this isn't a joke. If you invest, not only do Rachel and the kids benefit, you gain prestige. You'd be our first angel investor." I cut him off. "Victor, do you remember when my last birthday was?" He blinked. I'm not sure. Rachel usually." "February 14th, I said, voice hard as steel. "The same day as Valentine's. Hard to forget. Yet you've forgotten for 12 years straight." He fumbled a thin smile. "You're changing the subject. We're talking business." I leaned back and held his gaze. "Last year I had knee surgery. 3 days in the hospital. Rachel came once with flowers from the lobby. You sent a pre-signed card. You call that care?" His face tightened. His tone snapped. "You're dredging up the past. We need to focus on the future." "The futures you're selling," I said, "are fantasies. I've poured in over $500,000 for this family. What did I get? Demands and ingratitude." He slapped the table. The bottle rattled. "You owe us. You think you can just leave? Rachel gave you a home. We gave you meaning after your wife died. Without us, you're just a lonely old man clutching memories. You must repay us." I stood, my voice low but sharp. "My meaning isn't being your wallet. I've faced death at sea and led hundreds of men. I don't need a failure like you to define my worth." He paled, then tried to recover. "If you won't invest, the startup dies. The house goes. Your kids will suffer." I stepped to the table, meeting his eyes. "Those aren't my kids. That's your and Rachel's responsibility. And if my child truly loved me, she would never have said, 'Don't expect to stay long.'" Victor fell silent. He hid behind a gulp of wine, but his hand shook, and it sloshed. I turned and opened the door. "Leave, and don't bring empty promises again. This apartment has no room for fakery." He stood, clinging to scraps of pride. "You'll regret this, Edmund. One day you'll see family matters above all, and then you'll be alone." I slammed the door. The echo in the small apartment sounded like a final horn at the end of a battle. I stood still and drew a long breath. Outside, Lake Eola rippled under the moon. I knew I'd won the first skirmish, but the war would be long. I knew Victor wouldn't stop after being refused. He's not one to surrender, especially with his and Rachel's interests on the brink. And I was right. 1 week later, on Saturday night, my peace was shattered completely. The pounding on the door was louder, no longer solitary, through the peephole, not just Victor this time. Rachel stood beside him, mascara streaked, clutching a tissue box. Behind them were Ethan and Lily, my 2 grandchildren. Ethan crossed his arms, face blank. Lily kept her head down, avoiding my eyes. But there were 2 more, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, Victor's parents. Thomas, big-framed, with a factory worker's gravelly voice. Linda, a woman who always wore a sugary fake smile. 6 people crowded the narrow hallway, a family intervention I had never agreed to. "Edmund, open up!" Thomas growled. "We need to talk." I cracked the door, but held my ground in the frame. The yellow hall light washed over their tense faces. "What are you trying to do? This is my home." Rachel rushed forward, voice breaking. "Dad, please listen to me. I'm sorry for what I said. But if you don't help now, the bank will take the house. The kids will lose their home. Please, just this once." Victor gestured like a stage director. "You can make this right. One investment, one signature, and it's fine." I shook my head, eyes passing over each of them. For 15 years, I poured in nearly $500,000. I paid debts, bought cars, covered tuition, and even dental bills. In return, I got ingratitude and threats. Linda suddenly piped up in a high voice. "Mr. Edmund, you're an elder. You should think about legacy. Family is for helping one another. Why keep your money? Give it to the grandchildren." I looked at her, voice cold. "Help is mutual. This is exploitation. I'm no longer blind." The clamor erupted. Thomas launched into a lecture about family duty. Rachel cried and blamed me for everything. Ethan spat. "You're selfish. You never showed me love." Lily, lifting her face for the first time, whispered, "Mom, that's enough." But her words were drowned out by the others. In the chaos, Lily's voice rose from the end of the hallway. My granddaughter, the only one who still kept in touch, stood there clutching her school bag, her face taut. "Everyone, be quiet!" Lily shouted, freezing the corridor. She turned to each of them. "Grandpa was in the hospital last year. Which of you visited? Who remembered his birthday without Mom reminding you?" No one. Only Mr. Harold brought soup. Everyone else disappeared. "And now you're here asking for money?" The air congealed. My heart tightened, but not from fear. For the first time, someone other than me was speaking the truth. I drew a deep breath and said loudly, each word ringing out, "Enough. You only remember me when you need money. From now on, don't come here. Lily, you are always welcome. The rest of you, learn to stand on your own feet." I shut the door firmly. The arguing continued in the hall. Victor blaming Rachel, Thomas barking, Linda wailing, Ethan cursing, Lily sobbing, and Linda snapping back. It all blended into a cacophonous score. Inside, the apartment sank into stillness. I leaned against the door, closed my eyes, and felt peace return like a gift. Outside, Lake Yola's waves lapped steadily, affirming that I was right to draw my boundary. After the hallway turmoil, the lakefront apartment grew quiet again, but I knew the silence was only temporary. Rachel and Victor would not give up easily. The more cornered they felt, the more frantically they would try to drag me back into the old whirlpool. I sat at the desk and opened the leather case holding every important document: bank statements, contracts, insurance records, and the trust file I had signed with Clara Jennings the previous week. Each number, each line was a brick, and I was building the fortress that would protect the rest of my life. On Monday morning, I returned to Clara's office. The young attorney, sharp and composed, received me in a bright room. "I'm guessing your week was stormy?" She smiled, reading my thoughts in my eyes. "I need more protection," I said plainly. "Rachel and Victor won't stop. I want every remaining asset, from savings and pension to insurance, placed beyond their reach." Clara nodded and spread out new forms. "We'll move everything into an irrevocable trust, with Lily as the sole beneficiary. I also recommend an additional state-level layer. Nevada has very strong laws. If litigation arises, your apartment is exempt." Hearing Lily's name calmed me. The image of her in that hallway, voice ringing out to defend me against the crowd of adults, stayed vivid. That granddaughter proved that not everything was lost. Over 2 hours, I signed document after document. Each stroke of the pen felt like a cut severing old chains. Clara explained carefully, "Once notarized, Rachel and Victor have no legal basis to reach this money. Even if they sue, the law is on your side." On the way back, I stopped at the bank to see James Walker, my longtime financial advisor. Studying the figures, James gave a low whistle. I've done this for 20 years, and it's rare to see someone spend more than $400,000 on family only to be repaid with such cold shoulders. You've been exceedingly generous. I gave a thin smile. Generosity without gratitude is just foolishness. Now I'm learning to keep what's mine. In the afternoon, as sunlight turned Lake Yola gold, I sat on the balcony and reread the freshly notarized agreements. In the desk drawer, I kept a USB loaded with scans of everything: tuition bills, car purchases, medical invoices, every expense I had covered for Rachel and Victor. I knew the day would come when it would be needed, not only to remind myself, but to show the world the truth. That night, as I was about to sleep, the phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You won't escape. That little apartment won't shield you forever. V. I set the phone down, calmer than ever. For the first time in years, I felt no fear. I had built my own fortress, and this time, no one could topple it. That morning, sunlight spilled onto Lake Yola like a giant mirror. I had just poured my coffee and sat on the balcony, feeling life finally slide back into a peaceful rhythm. The calm lasted only a few minutes. The phone rang. On the screen, Harold, the longtime friend I once worked with at the shipping company. Edmund, his voice shook. Have you seen the news? They filmed a whole piece about you. The local paper just reposted it. Brace yourself. Frowning, I opened the laptop on the table. A local site flashed a bold headline: A father abandons his family while living in lakeside luxury. Beneath it, a 3-minute video. I hit play. The screen dimmed, then brightened. What appeared was not reality, but a staged theater, crafted so neatly that anyone who didn't know the truth would believe it. The camera panned across a shabby kitchen, a cheap yellow bulb, stained walls, a wobbly wood table. Rachel sat in the middle, wearing a faded cardigan, face pale, coughing hard. In front of her was a plate of watery pasta. Beside her, Ethan glowered at a bowl of shriveled potatoes, while Lily, forced into the role, quietly bit a piece of dry bread, eyes cast down. Victor, in a thin jacket and holding a crumpled brown paper bag, pulled out a withered apple, raising it to the camera with a weary voice. I work 3 jobs a day and still can't provide for my family. Meanwhile, my father lives like a king by the lake, abandoning us. The camera swung to another corner, a chair piled with old clothes, a few cheap generic pill bottles on the table. Rachel held a blister pack and choked out, "Without insurance, I have to split pills in half to save some for the kids. I never thought my own father would abandon us like this." Sad piano music swelled. Spliced among the grim scenes were sneak shots of my apartment, the leather armchair by the window, a glass of red wine on a polished wood table, the balcony opening onto sunlit water. A caption appeared: "While his family struggles, Mr. Edmund lives in luxury, indifferent to his grandchildren." My fists clenched until my knuckles went white. They had turned me into the villain of my own story, a perfect script to stoke hatred and pity the couple. The video spread across local social media at once. Comments stacked beneath the post. "What an ungrateful man! What kind of father lives like that while his kids suffer? He has money, but no heart." That afternoon, I walked the lake path. The breeze stayed cool, but the passers-by's eyes were no longer casual. A few neighbors whispered as I went by. An older woman from the floor below looked straight at me and said, "How could you abandon your daughter?" I didn't answer. I went back upstairs, shut the door, and sat at the table. I opened the drawer and took out a small silver USB. Plugging it into the laptop, I watched the files appear: Ethan's tuition invoices, Rachel's hospital bills, car purchase receipts, even the plane tickets and hotel for their Hawaii vacation. Everything preserved, signatures and dates in place. I flipped through each file, my heart aching yet cold. They can stage a false story, but I have a lifetime of evidence. One day the truth will be undeniable. The phone buzzed. A message from Lily. The short words trembled. "Grandpa, I know that video was staged. I'm ashamed they dragged me into it. Please don't be sad. I still believe you. I exhaled in relief, a faint smile breaking through. In the darkness, there was still a spark keeping me afloat. Lily, the only grandchild untouched by their dirty game, was living proof my life hadn't been wasted. Night fell. I had just set my book down when a new email appeared. Subject: Notice of mediation demand before lawsuit. It came from a small law office claiming to represent Rachel and Victor. They accused me of neglecting family obligations and demanded I attend mediation within 14 days, or they would file suit. I sat motionless for a moment, then rose and stepped onto the balcony. Lake Eola stretched out before me, city lights rippling like silver streaks. I drew a deep breath, my eyes cold. If you want it public, I murmured, then it will be public, not with lies, but with the truth. The next morning, Orlando's skies were crystal clear, sunlight reflecting on the calm surface of Lake Eola. I sat on my balcony, hot coffee steaming. It should have been an ordinary morning, but the yellow envelope on the table made it unforgettable. I slit the edge with a knife and pulled out a thick sheaf of papers. On the first page, in bold, Notice of Intent to Sue. I read each line, my heartbeat slow but heavy. Plaintiffs Rachel Whitaker and Victor Whitaker allege that Edmund Caldwell abandoned his duty to support the family, causing financial and emotional harm. They demand damages of $200,000. If mediation is refused within 14 days, we will proceed with litigation. I let out a hoarse, dry laugh that echoed in the small apartment. 200,000! After nearly $500,000 over 15 years, they still dared to say it wasn't enough. I picked up the phone and called Clara Jennings. Her voice came sharp over the line. Keep the envelope sealed. I'll come right away. An hour later, Clara entered the apartment, leather case in hand. Her familiar look, hair neatly tied, slim glasses, sharp eyes of someone seasoned in battle, was steadying. She skimmed the document, then lifted her head and nodded, exactly as I suspected. They're using legal pressure to force your hand. I folded my arms and leaned back. Mediation? No. I want the court to decide. I want the truth exposed. Clara smiled faintly, resting her hand on the thick files I had prepared. Pages numbered, organized, as if my whole life had been waiting for this moment. We already have everything, Edmund, but to be certain, I want to comb through it once more. That afternoon, my apartment turned into a temporary war room. Papers covered the table. Lily's tuition invoices, Ethan's technical course fees, Rachel's appendectomy hospital bills, auto insurance receipts, and even the vacations Victor insisted on. Clara flipped through page by page, marking with red pen and sticky notes, like a surgeon planning a delicate operation. You don't just have documents, she said, eyes glinting. You have a witness. Harold, your old Navy mate, longtime neighbor, he's ready to testify. He saw you writing checks, sending money, helping Rachel and Victor. My chest tightened. Harold, my friend who had called countless times to warn and encourage me, now stood as my final bastion. I nodded softly. Clara, I'll give you every original. I've guarded them for years. If now is the time, I won't hold back. 2 days later, Clara returned, this time with a small suitcase. She opened it to reveal a binder, neatly divided. On the cover, Caldwell versus Whitaker, defense exhibits. Edmund, we're not just defending, she said slowly. We're going on offense. The court will see. You didn't abandon them. They turned your help into a habit of bleeding you dry. I stared at the binder, a wave of bitterness and relief rising. Helen would have smiled had she lived to see me defend my name. On the day of the preliminary hearing, the Orange County Courthouse was packed. Local reporters filled the benches, cameras clicking. I entered with my cane, back straight. Across the aisle, Rachel sat with reddened eyes, twisting a tissue. Victor draped his arm around her, glancing about with feigned exhaustion. The judge entered, gavel striking. We begin. The plaintiff's attorney rose, voice lilting with theatrical flair. My clients, Mrs. Rachel Whitaker and family, have suffered hardship due to abandonment by her father. They cannot meet basic expenses. The children live in deprivation. Therefore, we demand damages of $200,000. Rachel burst into tears. Victor clutched her shoulder, his face contorted in counterfeit anguish. Murmurs rippled through the room. Clara stood and stepped forward. She said little, only placing the thick binder before the judge. Her voice was crisp, each word a blade. Your Honor, this is evidence proving Mr. Edmund Caldwell supported the plaintiffs for 15 years. Nearly $500,000 in total. Tuition, medical bills, insurance, cars, and more. All documented, signed, and dated. In addition, we present a witness, Mr. Harold, prepared to testify. The room fell silent. Reporters' keyboards clattered. The judge's eyes shifted from Rachel to me, then rested on the binder. This evidence, he said slowly, requires thorough review. I adjourn today's hearing to examine it. We reconvene next week. The gavel struck. The room buzzed again. Rachel's head sank. Victor's jaw tightened, and I sat still, my hand gripping the cane. Stepping out into the Orlando sun, Clara turned to me and nodded. We're on the right path. Patience. I looked toward Lake Eola in the distance, the rippling water glinting in the breeze. In my heart, one truth rang clear. The battle had just begun, and this time I would not retreat. The following week, Orlando sweltered as if the sun itself tested human patience. I walked into the Orange County courtroom, cane in hand, Harold right behind me, his tall frame unbowed despite 70 years. His firm grip on my shoulder was that of an old sailor. I'll handle my part, Edmund. They can't bend the truth. The courtroom was more crowded than before. News of the case had spread through the community. Faces of neighbors I once greeted by the lake now filled the public benches. Rachel sat at the plaintiff's table, eyes swollen. Victor, in a dark suit and gaudy tie, whispered nervously to his lawyer. The judge entered, gavel down. Clara was first to rise. She placed the numbered, organized binder squarely on the table. Your Honor, last week we filed copies. Today I present the originals. These are invoices, receipts, checks, and financial records proving Mr. Edmund Caldwell supported the plaintiffs with nearly $500,000 over 15 years. The opposing lawyer shot up. Those figures could be inflated. We need live testimony. Otherwise, it's just paper. Clara smiled as though she had waited for that line. Gladly, I call our witness. The courtroom doors opened. Harold strode to the stand, steady-eyed, his frame still firm. He raised his hand for the oath, then sat. Clara stepped forward. Please state your name and your relationship to the defendant. Harold, I served in the Navy with Mr. Edmund. Later, we were neighbors for many years. I've known him for over 40 years. During that time, did you witness Mr. Caldwell supporting his daughter and son-in-law? Harold nodded, voice ringing like a ship's bell. Many times. I saw him write checks and hand Rachel envelopes. Once he even asked me to drive him to the post office to send a bank draft to Victor when he was unemployed. I recall in 2017, Edmund withdrew from his retirement to pay for their Hawaii vacation. I asked why, and he just smiled. As long as Rachel is happy. The courtroom buzzed. Rachel bowed her head, lips trembling. Victor glanced sideways, sweating despite the cold air. Clara pressed on. Mr. Harold, as an independent witness, do you confirm that Edmund Caldwell supported the plaintiffs for years and did not abandon them as alleged? I flipped through each file, my heart aching yet cold. They can fabricate a false story, but I have a lifetime of evidence. One day, everyone will have to see the truth. The phone buzzed. A message from Lily, the short line trembling. Grandpa, I know that video was staged. I'm ashamed they dragged me into it. Please don't be sad. I still believe you. I exhaled and smiled faintly. In the darkness, there was still a spark keeping me from sinking. Lily, the only grandchild not swept into their dirty scheme, was living proof I had not lived in vain. Night fell. I had just set my book on the table when a new email appeared. Subject: Notice of mediation demand before filing suit. It came from a small law office claiming to represent Rachel and Victor. They accused me of neglecting family obligations, demanding I attend mediation within 14 days or they would formally file suit. I sat still for a moment, then stepped out onto the balcony. Lake Yola spread before me, city lights shimmering like silver streaks. I drew a long breath, my eyes turning cold. "If you want to go public," I murmured, "then I will go public too. Not with lies, but with the truth." The next morning, Orlando's sky was crystal clear, sunlight glittering on the calm surface of Lake Yola. I sat on my balcony, hot coffee steaming. It should have been an ordinary morning, but the yellow envelope on the table turned it into one I would never forget. I slid it open with a knife and pulled out a thick stack of papers. The first page stamped in bold, "Notice of intent to sue." I read line by line, my heartbeat slow but heavy. Plaintiff Rachel Whitaker and her husband, Victor Whitaker, allege that Mr. Edmund Caldwell abandoned his duty to support the family, causing economic and emotional harm. They demand damages of $200,000. If you do not agree to mediation within 14 days, we will proceed to file suit. I let out a hoarse, dry laugh that echoed in the small apartment. 200,000? After nearly $500,000 over 15 years, they still dared to say it was not enough. I picked up the phone and called Clara Jennings. Her voice was crisp over the line. "Keep the envelope intact. I'll come right away." An hour later, Clara stepped into the apartment and set her leather case on the table. The familiar look, hair neatly tied, slim frames, the sharp eyes of someone long seasoned in legal battles. She skimmed the document, then looked up and nodded slightly. "Exactly as I expected. They want to use legal pressure to force you to yield." I folded my arms and leaned back. "Mediation? No, I want the court to decide. I want the truth laid bare." Clara smiled lightly and rested her hand on the thick files I had prepared, numbered and careful as if I had waited my whole life for this moment. "We have everything, Edmund. But to be certain, I want one more pass." That afternoon, my apartment became a temporary war room. Papers covered the table. Lily's tuition invoices, Ethan's technical course payments, hospital bills from Rachel's appendectomy, auto insurance statements, and even the vacations Victor insisted on. Clara turned each page, marking with a red pen and sticky notes, like prepping a delicate operation. "You don't just have documents," she said, eyes brightening. "You have a witness. Harold, your old shipmate and longtime neighbor, will testify. He has seen you hand over checks, send bank drafts, and help Rachel and Victor." I sat quietly, my heart dipping. Harold, who had called me countless times to warn and encourage, now stood as a final bulwark. I nodded. "Clara, I'll give you every original. I've kept them for years. If this is the moment, I won't hold back." 2 days later, Clara returned with a small suitcase. Inside was a binder, neatly tabbed. On the cover, Caldwell v. Whitaker, Defense Exhibits. "Edmund, we are not only defending," she said slowly. "We are counterattacking. The court will see it clearly. You did not abandon your family. They turned your help into a habit of bleeding you dry." I looked at the binder, a wave of bitterness and relief rising. Helen would surely smile if she were alive to see me standing up for my name. On the day of the preliminary hearing, the Orange County Courthouse was packed. Local media were present, cameras clicking. I walked in, cane in hand, back straight. Across the aisle, Rachel sat silent, eyes red, hands twisting a tissue. Victor draped an arm over her, eyes darting, trying to look haggard. The judge entered and struck the gavel. "We begin." The plaintiff's attorney rose, voice theatrical. My client, Mrs. Rachel Whitaker, and her family have suffered hardship because her father abandoned them. They cannot meet living expenses. The children live in deprivation. Therefore, we demand damages of $200,000. Rachel burst into tears. Victor squeezed her shoulder, his face drawn in staged anguish. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Clara stood, stepped forward, and said little, only set the thick binder before the judge. Her voice was precise, each word a blade. Your Honor, this evidence shows that Mr. Edmund Caldwell supported the plaintiffs for 15 years, nearly $500,000 total. Tuition, medical bills, insurance, vehicles, and more, all preserved, signed, and dated. We also have a witness, Mr. Harold, ready to testify. The courtroom fell still. Reporters began to clatter on their keyboards. The judge's gaze moved from Rachel to me, then settled on the binder. This evidence, he said slowly, is extremely detailed. Tuition, insurance, hospital bills, even vacations. The figures match the bank statements exactly. This cannot be dismissed as inflated. It is the truth. The plaintiff's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, we need additional time to verify. But his voice faltered. Rachel kept her head down, tears streaming. Victor fidgeted non-stop, his hands clenched white. The entire abandonment script shattered at once. Clara returned to the counsel table with quiet poise, as if a well-planned move had landed. She said only, "Truth needs no embellishment. It only needs to be seen." When the hearing recessed, I stood with Harold in the hallway. He patted my shoulder. "Edmund, I didn't speak to help you. I spoke because the truth must be heard. We've lived our lives at sea. We won't let our honor sink beneath waves of lies." I gripped his hand, my eyes stinging. In that moment, I glimpsed Helen's shadow, smiling somewhere near. That afternoon, the court announced, "The panel will review further evidence and testimony. A full hearing will be held next month." Outside, reporters thrust microphones toward me. One asked loudly, "Mr. Edmund, do you have a message for your daughter and son-in-law?" I paused, drew a breath, and answered clearly, "My message is not for them. It's for mothers and fathers out there. Do not let kindness become a chain. If someone exploits your love to drain you, remember, family is not the same as servitude." Camera shutters clicked. Some reporters nodded and scribbled. That evening, Harold and I sat on the balcony with a bottle of whiskey. City lights danced on Lake Eola. He poured me a glass and said, voice low, "You know, Edmund, this is only the prelude. They won't quit easily, but at least today we push the truth into the light." I raised my glass to his. The whiskey bit the tongue but went down sweet. For the first time in months, a flame rose in my chest. The belief that honor can be defended and truth can beat deceit. As we left the courtroom that day, Clara met us in the hall, her face lit with confidence tempered by her usual caution. "We hold the initiative," she said softly. "The evidence and the witness are overwhelming. Still, Edmund, be ready. Sometimes the other side doesn't prolong. They retreat another way." I did not think much of it until 3 days later. Clara called, a hint of surprise in her voice. "They just proposed a settlement. Frankly, I'm a little surprised, this fast. Their counsel must see that if they continue, they will lose outright." She placed a printed email before me, the bold line, "Settlement proposal. Terms for withdrawal." Her finger tapped the page. "They want an in-person meeting. Edmund, the question is, what do you want from it?" I leaned back and looked out the window toward Lake Eola. The answer was clear. I don't want money. I want the truth. If they want my counterclaims withdrawn, they must apologize publicly, in the very place they defame me. A week later, we sat in a 15th floor conference room in a glass building downtown, not family around a dinner table, but parties facing each other over a final accord. Late May in Orlando, the sun still blazed as if to melt the streets. I entered with Clara beside me and Harold behind. The Orange County mediation room was bright and cold. white neon pouring onto the long, dark wood table. Across from us, Rachel and Victor waited, faces tight, with a salt and pepper attorney who looked seasoned. Clara opened the file and set it squarely before her, voice calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, my client, Mr. Edmund Caldwell, supported the plaintiffs for nearly $500,000 over 15 years. Every invoice, receipt, and check is in order. The abandonment claim has no basis. She paused, met Rachel and Victor's eyes, and continued, softer but icy. Mr. Caldwell has the evidence to clear his name. If this case drags on, your filing fees and legal costs will be substantial. Moreover, given the staged videos and defamatory posts, this can escalate into criminal exposure for defamation. The consequences would be far more serious. I advise you to end it here. Silence. Rachel went pale, twisting a tissue to shreds. Victor clenched his jaw, ready to snap back, but their attorney cut him off with a hard glance. He knew the position. Prolonging meant heavier defeat, maybe worse. Clara slid our term across the table. My client will withdraw his counterclaims on one condition. Rachel and Victor must post a public video admitting they staged the smear against their father and apologizing. Only then can Mr. Caldwell regain the reputation they publicly damaged. Rachel blurted, "No, I can't humiliate myself like that." Victor's face tightened, his hands shaking. My attorney cleared her throat and enunciated, "If you refuse, you face fees, legal costs, and potential criminal exposure. The choice is yours." They huddled with counsel. After a long, heavy silence, Rachel began to cry. Victor bowed his head, lips pressed thin. The answer was obvious. 3 days later, the video appeared on Facebook and Twitter. Rachel and Victor sat side by side, voices catching. We admit the images that circulated did not reflect the truth. Our father, Mr. Edmund Caldwell, has supported the family for many years. We apologize for damaging his reputation. The video spread as quickly as the first, but this time the comments were different. Mr. Caldwell is a great father. Respect to him for not bowing to lies. A hard lesson for those who exploit family ties. My honor was restored. I received messages of support from old friends, neighbors, and even strangers. Harold clapped my shoulder and laughed. See? The truth wins in the end. Meanwhile, word leaked that Victor's much-boasted logistics startup officially went bankrupt after investors pulled out. Family scandal on top of a shaky project. Rachel and Victor, long used to living off others, had to find ordinary jobs. Rachel back to the hotel as a night shift receptionist. Victor on the floor of a freight company as a shift employee. I sat on the balcony of my Lake Eola apartment, sipping morning coffee. The lake rippled, Orlando's sky bright and blue. I knew I had come through the gale. I had reclaimed my honor and left my daughter and son-in-law a hard lesson. No one can live forever by exploiting others. In the end, everyone must stand on their own feet. On a quiet Sunday, Lake Eola was calmer than usual. Mist hovered over the water as white swans drifted by. I sat in my familiar armchair holding the journal Caroline had given me while she was alive. Inside, page after page recorded sums, loans, and the shaky handwriting of a father who once believed family is everything. Now that the journal was no longer a record of blind sacrifice, it had become evidence, and then a mirror reflecting the truth. Because of it, I recovered my honor, and the community learned that Edmund Caldwell had not turned his back on his children. He had simply refused to be an endless wallet. Harold dropped by with 2 hot coffees from the Park Cafe. He set one down and smiled. "Edmund, the Navy vets are talking about you. They say you did what many want to do but lack the courage for, set boundaries with your own blood." I chuckled, a rare, easy laugh. "Maybe I just relearned an old lesson, Harold. At sea, if you don't cut the anchor line in time, the ship goes down. Family is no different." As we watched the lake, my phone buzzed. A message from Lily. "Grandpa, I have a presentation at school today. I want you to come." My eyes blurred. That child, through the storm, had kept her heart clear. She was proof that from broken pieces, something decent can still grow. That afternoon, I sat in the auditorium and watched Lily speak with confidence on personal responsibility in the family. She ended with a line that knotted my chest. "I believe responsibility is not something you dump onto your parents. Everyone must stand firm and carry their share." The class applauded. Her eyes met mine, bright as late spring sun. Back at the apartment, I opened the window toward the lake. Orlando glowed in the evening, the sky washed in pink and orange. I sat at the table and wrote the final line in my journal. June 2nd. I, Edmund Caldwell, have reclaimed my honor. I am no longer the anchor holding a rotten ship. I am myself, a seasoned sailor who knows when to stop and when to let go. Caroline, I kept my promise. I did not let anyone bury the rest of our lives. Now I can live in peace. Outside, church bells drifted across the flat water. I sipped my coffee, let the bitterness rest on my tongue, and smiled. For the first time in years, the smile wasn't forced. It was the smile of a man who has weathered the storm and finally found a quiet harbor. My final lesson is simple. Kindness is precious, but kindness does not mean letting others trample you. Everyone must learn to stand on their own feet, and sometimes saying enough is the wisest form of love. If this story speaks to you, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with your friends. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my place, would you stay silent or stand up to reclaim your honor? Thanks to your listening, I know justice and truth never stand alone.